Well, welcome to lecture 10 of Kant's philosophy of the self in the critique of pure reason. It's been months. Well, it's been a half year since I gave the last lecture. There was a lockdown in Tokyo, and I couldn't really get out of my house, and I really couldn't get to my office, so I couldn't really make this video. And we were finally set free yesterday, so I'm gonna resume my lecture series on Kant's philosophy of the self again. Since I gave the last lecture, lecture 9, more than 6,000 people have downloaded my dissertation. This thesis of mine. 6,000 people read it. That's pretty many. And in lecture 9, I studied chapter 5, and I referred to page 19 and page 20 of chapter 5 here. This is chapter 5, okay? This is where I'll be reading today. Now, I said on page 20 that each human being has parents. You have a father and a mother, which means there are a couple of other phenomenal selves apart from your phenomenal self, which produces you. And I said at the bottom of page 20, each couple of phenomenal selves to a certain extent can will what their child is going to be like. Oh, excuse me, I should go back to well, what was that? Whoa, it's been a long time without all right, that's right, the bottom of page 20, that each couple of phenomenal selves, like our parents, to a certain extent can will what their child is going to be like by thinking how the two genes get mixed and so on. I said two genes. I'm not an expert in genetics, and two genes, I just meant my father's gene and my mother's gene, just for simplicity. I know the study of genetics is more complicated, but I just said two genes, so some of you might wonder, well, there should be more genes, but when I said each couple of phenomenal cells can will what the child is going to be like by thinking how the two genes get mixed, it's just father's gene and mother's gene. That's what I meant. And they're free to some degree choosing what their babies is going to be like. But they're not totally free. They're only partly free. when we buy something, when we shop something, for instance, when we when we buy a sweater, see the winter is coming, so that you want to buy a sweater, and you look through the catalog of LL Bean, and you just find the exact sweater you like, and you order it, and you buy it, and you wear it. But with case of your child, it doesn't go that way, because the choice is very limited. And also, going back to the Findlay was professor of philosophy at the BU, and he said, as on page 19, transcendental noumenal self must choose the whole course of its actions in one single meta-empirical package, which means that we don't choose what to do. We don't choose our action just a few seconds before we actually do. I mean, we choose the whole course of our life at the moment we stepped into the phenomenal world. Namely, when we are born, we chose the whole course of the actions. So we don't really choose any particular action. We just choose a whole package of our life. For instance, Kant was born in 1724, and he died in 1804. And he didn't really choose to write the Critique of Pure Reason in 1770, and committed himself for writing it for the next 11 years. He just chose it, whether he was aware of it or not. He chose it when he was born. That seems kind of odd, but that's what Findlay says. So I say on page 21, going back to the argument of Findlay that the self chooses the whole course of its actions, it is not a particular action one chooses to do at each time, but it is a sum of all his actions which he chooses that he will do at one time at the beginning of his life. For example, it is not that I plan to kill. Well, I don't really like saying kill, but I just happened to write kill 33 years ago. It is not that I plan to kill someone a few days before I actually do so, or it is not that I decide to lie to someone a few seconds before I really lie to him. It is that I will to do these two things along with all other things I am going to do at the very beginning of my life. This is the point. And so even we feel as though we are choosing our action every time we actually take that action, or we decide to do something a few minutes or a few seconds before we actually do so. Well, that's how you feel, but actually you chose the whole package of your life when you were born. And well, then The question is how Kant could do so before he was born, for he had been unconscious until the moment he stepped into the empirical world. One may object that although the self must be in the empirical world in order to be empirically conscious of himself, it can be outside that world in order to be transcendental conscious of himself. However, transcendental consciousness is the consciousness of existence, and nothing can be conscious of its existence unless it actually exists. One may also argue that the noumenal self can exist and will independently of the actual existence of the empirical self. This argument cannot be valid since, as described on page 19, the noumenal self necessarily entails the empirical selves. This is what Kant says in the subsection 25 of the transcendental deduction B. I mean, B deduction is the transcendental deduction in the second edition. And this is what Kant says in the subsection 25 of the B deduction. Where's that? It says in the transcendental synthesis of manifold representations in general, on the contrary, hence, in the synthetic original unity of a perception, I am conscious of myself, not as I appear to myself, nor as I am myself, but only that I am. Here, the mind is conscious, transcendentally conscious of its existence. And that's what I got the idea on page 22. Plus, I also said that one may also argue that the I said there's something in common between Kant's two selves on the one hand and Aristotle's mind and body on the other hand. Omitting for simplicity his active mind. Aristotle's passive mind is a form of man, whereas the body is a matter of man. Well, Aristotle draws a distinction between the body and mind. He further makes a distinction between active mind and passive mind. And I'm not talking about active mind. I just for simplicity, I just talk about passive mind. And Aristotle's passive mind is a form of man. See, Aristotle's philosophy is based on the distinction between form and matter. Everything has a form and matter. For instance, the desk. Well, you can't see my desk because my camera is on the desk. The form, the matter, or material cause of my desk is wood, and the form of the desk is the desk. All right. So for Aristotle, the matter of human being is body, and the form of the human being is mind. And just as Kant talks about self in itself and self as appearance. See, for Kant, his philosophy is based on the appearance-reality distinction, just as for Aristotle, his philosophy is based on the form-matter distinction. So for Kant, the self is composed of both phenomenal self and noumenal self. So that for Aristotle, neither of them can exist without the other. Although, I mean, neither of the, okay, I read it again. Omitting for simplicity for his active mind, Aristotle's passive mind is a form of man, whereas body is a matter of man. Neither of them can exist without the other. Although they are distinguishable, they're not inseparable. Similarly, Kant's two selves are distinguishable, but they're not separable. If there were difference between two selves, it would be that for Aristotle it is the mind which is an actualization of the body, whereas for Kant it is a phenomenal self containing the body which is an actualization of the noumenal self, namely mind itself. However, both philosophers, I think, would agree that the distinction between the two aspects of man is merely logical. What I'm saying is for Aristotle, body and mind are distinguishable, but they're not separable. For Plato, body and mind are not just distinguishable, but body and mind are separable, and the mind can exist without the body. The mind can be separated from the body, and it can exist by itself, and the mind or the soul is immortal. That's what Plato said. Well, that's what he says in Apology and Crito and Phaedo. In those dialogues, he says the mind or soul is distinguishable and separable from the body, and the mind can exist by itself, and it is immortal. So the mind will not die even if after our body dies. Like Kant died when he was 80, but his body is gone. His body has disappeared, but his soul is still living because it's immortal according to Plato. And Plato died. I mean, Socrates died when he was about 73, 75, and his body disappeared. But since his mind or his soul is separable from the body, Socrates' soul is immortal, and it's still alive somewhere. Well, for Aristotle, mind and body are distinguishable but not separable. Likewise, for Kant, phenomenal self and noumenal self are distinguishable, but they're not separable. They always go together. That's what I try to do in chapter 5. It's been a half year, and I didn't do very well today. Maybe you thought this 10th lecture of mine is not as good as my past lectures, but since I've been away from this lecture series for more than half a year, so just forgive me. I think I'll do a better job in my next lecture, lecture 11. Just the coronavirus really affect our life, and lockdown in where I live really screwed my life, and I'm not used to giving lectures on video. I mean, I'm just starting. I'm just restarting this lecture, and my apology if I didn't do very well today, but I try to get better in my next lecture, lecture 11. So I hope to see you again.